The world this morning is watching Ukraine and Russia. Troops and tanks have pushed into Ukraine shortly after Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered a military operation to, quote, demilitarize and denazify the country. Those words from Vladimir Putin. Missiles and airstrikes hitting the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, and several other cities overnight. The Ukrainian government has confirmed at least 40 soldiers have been killed just in the first hours of this invasion. Joining me right now is the Center for American Security co-chairman and Fox News contributor, General Keith Kellogg. General, your reaction.
Yeah, Maria. Well, look, you turned a phrase a little bit ago. We're in the fog of war, and we really are right now. We're really not too sure what is happening because it has to kind of sort itself out. Is how deep is Putin going to go? Is he going to cross the Dnieper River? Is he going to go into the western part of Ukraine? Is he going to stay on the eastern part of Ukraine? Is he going to take Odessa in the south? Where's he going to go to? And I think that will sort itself out over the next few hours. And be very careful about making not you, but anybody, making a pronouncement early because it tends to change in warfare. The first report is generally always wrong. But we know what he wants to do. He wants to decapitate the government of Ukraine. He wants to take Zelensky out. He wants to put somebody that is like him in control of Ukraine. And then he probably wants to control as much of it as he can. But, you know, to remind everybody, when you take away European Russia, Ukraine is the largest country in Europe. And it's massive in size, and it takes an enormous amount of troops to secure that. And I don't think he can do that. So he's going to have to make some decisions on where he wants to go and what he wants to do. But is it an invasion? Absolutely. And this whole thing about going to the past, about Nazis and Nazification and anything like that is just foolish. He's made a very hard power play, and we should respond accordingly. This is a global issue. It's not a European issue anymore. And the reason I say that is President Xi of China is watching this. The supreme leader in Iran is watching this. Kim Jong-un is watching this. Everybody's going to watch President Biden and how he reacts to this as the leader of the free world, and let's see where it goes from there.
Well, we've seen already where it's gone, as some have perceived weakness in the White House. I mean, all of a sudden, we learned this morning that the U.S. is going to be ending the China initiative. Again, rolling over for the CCP. That China initiative was able to target those individuals who were sending information back to the CCP and stealing intellectual property. And now this administration says it's shutting down this Trump-era China initiative. What do you want to hear from President Biden? He's scheduled to address the American people this afternoon. We have not seen any sanctions of real merit to stop Vladimir Putin. Any consequences that he can raise that include more sanctions? And what about the China element?
Yeah, Maria, it's a great question. Now, he's going to have to go out of character. And what I mean by that, he's going to have to be very decisive. He's now a wartime leader. He needs to understand that. And because it's impacting everybody. Everybody's kind of looking to President Biden and said, okay, where are you going to go? Because they will all cue off him. What are the Europeans going to do? What are the people in the Middle East going to do? What are the people in Asia going to do as well? So he's going to have to be very firm. And look, I've been a big believer all along, being 4 years in the White House. Sanctions take a long time to bite. Sanctions really don't work. There's a whole body of work that question the use of sanctions. When you use sanctions, you have to understand it's also an act of war. And so how are you going to continue to use sanctions in a very heavy manner? And he should basically look at Europeans and say, look, the only way you're going to affect Russia is you need to wean yourself off all of the energy that you're getting from Russia. Right now, Germany gets 60% of its energy from Russia. Europe gets about 30%. You just shut it down, because that's the only thing he understands. Right now, Russia is the third largest exporter of energy in the world. Heck, we take in 600,000 barrels a day from Russia.
Yes.
That's insane. And we should just shut that down. Hit him where it hurts. That's his energy area.
That is exactly right. And I understand that we have been increasing our imports from Russia in the last year. I mean, what about the U.S. turning to its own policy decisions and reversing them? How about Joe Biden comes out this afternoon and says, I am reversing the ban on drilling on federal lands. I am reversing what I just said on day one when I walked into office and killed the XL pipeline. Do something to make the world believe that the U.S. is on the march to energy independence once again. Instead, Instead, we've got these sanctions on two Kremlin-backed banks, Russian elites, the company behind the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. The U.S. also increasing restrictions on Moscow's sovereign debt. Is this enough, General? I mean, we know that the global markets are wide open to Russia. Look at all of these companies that are trading in indexes and indices that U.S. investors are unwittingly funding the expansion of Russia's military with this.
Yeah, you know, Maria, you kind of hit it pretty clearly. He's going to have to change form. He's going to have to go back and reverse a lot of the things he said, especially in the energy sector. You know, he's got to open up. If today he said, I'm going to reopen the Keystone XL pipeline, that's a huge statement he needs to make. You know, we need to go back to energy independence. We're not there anymore. He caused that, and he needs to understand that, so he needs to change his policies. But if he plays true to form, he won't do that. I am hoping that somebody walks into the Oval Office and tells him and reminds him who he is, and that's the leader of the free world. He's president of the United States, and he needs to act very decisively. Because right now, what he put out, and even Bloomberg made that comment yesterday, these sanctions hit with a dud. You have to be very firm, very strong, and Putin's going to watch that. And he needs to push back on Putin. Putin's used some very, very explosive language, and we should respond to that language. Putin implied, that if you interfere with what I'm doing, if you read between the lines, he says the nuclear capacity is there. We need to remind him that he's not facing one nuclear power in the West. He's facing three. He's facing the British, and he's facing the French, and he's facing the United States. So if you want to play this game, it's game on. I don't know if he can do that.
I don't know either, especially since he continues to push this climate change agenda. Let me just point out that the Blackstone Group yesterday announced that it will no longer fund oil and gas exploration. The Blackstone Group. So corporate America is taking a cue from this president, and they are beginning to stop funding fossil fuel. I don't know what this means for the oil industry in this country as the rest of the world benefits from these policy decisions. General, final word real quick.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Because energy is critical. Because if you really want to hurt Putin, you hit him where it hurts most, and that's energy. Because he's the third largest energy producer in the world. He produces much of the energy for Europe. That's where you shut him down. That's where you play tough. If you don't play really hard, and you need to tell our European allies the same thing, it's time for you to go cold turkey on Russia. Sorry, but that's the way it's going to have to be.
All right, General. Well, what are the odds that Biden says that he's reversing his decision on the XL pipeline? I don't know. General Keith Kellogg, we'll check in with you. Thank you so much, sir. We appreciate it. Stay with us.